Okay, somebody needs to switch off their microphone. Thank you. Yeah, yesterday we were talking about liberalism, and I told you that in a way, if you look at liberalism, it isn't not in a way. If you look at it, it is not at all a cohesive body of thought. Okay, it is some kind of a large umbrella in which many people have, under which many people have taken shelter. So classical liberalism is what would be the liberalism that has been what should I say, that has been introduced to the world by John Locke primarily, and I am not sure if we'll add the economists to it. I will add them, if at all, to classical political economy. But I am a little uncomfortable adding them to the notion of uh, liberalism as such, the classical liberalism. And let me also tell you that a number of people believe that because this has become classical liberalism, uh, it basically means that this form of liberalism doesn't exist anymore, and that is why people talk about neoliberalism. And hey, sorry, my idiot dogs are here for some reason. So if we actually look at if we actually look at classical liberalism, it is perhaps a better way of putting it would have been classic liberalism, okay, rather than classical, but it doesn't matter. Now we talk about classical music. Classical music persists even today, right? Uh, so just because it began as something and therefore attained the status of classical, it does not mean that it doesn't exist anymore. Classical liberalism exists even now. And I have a bone to pick with those people who talk about neoliberalism as being different, significantly different from classical liberalism. I don't think there is so much difference between what people call neoliberalism and classical liberalism that it warrants uh, a new nomenclature called neoliberalism. For me, liberalism is liberalism unless and until people have moved out of what should we say, moved out of the framework of classical liberalism like the utilitarians did, uh, and like Rawls did. So I told you that yesterday, I told you that I will be doing John Rawls first and not libertarianism, because the defining moment of uh, libertarianism is something that came with Robert Nozick, even though there are other people before him in America, William Belsham and Murray Rothbard. So you have these people, but it doesn't, they haven't provided the proper contours of what would constitute libertarianism. And in his critique of John Rawls, Robert Nozick was able to do that. So therefore, I thought that it might be a good idea to talk about Rawlsian liberalism first and then go to libertarianism. And I told you the beginnings of libertarianism are funnily in anarchism and and it was actually called left libertarianism. And then William Belsham called it right wing libertarianism, which is a little funny thing because right wing always is associated with conservatism, not with liberalism. And it is even more poignant, this kind of a thing that he created, right wing libertarianism, because in America, liberalism is not really seen as a philosophy. It's only among some very, very, um, what do we say, some very, very well educated political theorists that you find the definition of liberalism that we use and that what people in Europe use. But in America, liberals are the opposite of conservatives. Uh, and they have funny categories. They will talk about conservatives as normal. They don't, normally we see conservatives as those who are backward. We see them as upholding values which are not exactly um, in tune with times. Uh, but in America, they are seen as the conservatism is not a bad word. Okay, it's in fact what they believe holds America together. And it is most definitely the philosophy of the white supremacists. Okay, and against them, if you fight for civil rights and someday we'll have to do human rights, civil rights, political rights, constitutional rights, but not here. We'll have to do it in the other forum uh, because the language of rights is pretty complicated. And if you look at the uh, if you basically look at liberals there, they are considered to be uh, people who are supporting uh, the civil rights and political rights of the black people. And of late, there have been newer addition to the category of liberal in America. Uh, there is a thing called left liberal. A left liberal is one who is a little more extreme um, than, say, a liberal. A left liberal to them is one who even supports the rights of what has now come to be called LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, and queer. So they support these people. They they are otherwise seen as freaks of nature, but they support these kind of people. So they are called left liberals. And those who support gay marriages or same sex marriages and also say that they should be given all the rights and entitlements that are given to regular marriages. Those people are seen as uh, very left liberal or radical liberals. That's the usage of terminology of liberal in the United States of America. So it doesn't correspond entirely, or it doesn't correspond at all, actually, with the uh, idea of liberalism as a philosophy uh, or a philosophical system. It doesn't correspond with that.
Uh, Sir,
Yeah.
so if a person is called a liberal, there's no harm in that, right?
In
He is a
America,
liberal. And why do we call that so-called liberal? Why
uh,
is there negative sense attached to it?
because they are supporting things which are the whole LGBTQ question is considered to be unnatural. Uh, in America, sexuality has not been resolved. What sexuality is, what it stands for, is a question that has remained unresolved. So we don't they take LGBTQs as unnatural people, because if you look at the Midwest, which is the largest portion, and that is also called the Bible Belt, which is where you have all these church going communities, they believe that sex is an act for procreation, okay, and it is not an act for recreation. All right, so in fact, Foucault wrote a book in which it's called The History of Sexuality, um, in which he argues that if you look at sex in uh, if you look at sex in some of the old civilizations, uh, it is an erotic art. So he uses the term, Latin term for it, which is ars erotica, A-R-S E-R-O-T-I-C-A. Ars erotica is what it was. It was something which was for recreation, for the maximization of pleasure, not in the utilitarian sense. So he says that is what the function of sexuality was. But over a period of time, uh, with the here again, I use what you just said, why so called advancement of civilization, uh, we have now come to what he calls sex as science, sexual. No, wait a minute. What is that I was going to say? The Latin. Yeah, scientia, SCIENTI, scientia sexualis, SEXUALIS, scientia sexualis, which is the science of sex. It's not an erotic art anymore. Okay, it has been given the status of a science, and in doing so, its functions have been very clearly defined. And in doing that, we're defining the functions of sex. The idea of what is normal and what is not is brought in. That is what Foucault argues, and I believe he argues that very, very correctly. So the Bible Belt will believe that it's only for the sake of uh, procreation, not for anything else. So they say, do you find homosexual animals? Do you find all these things, that all these categories that you are seeing in human beings, lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgenders? I don't know why queer. I always thought queer was the same as gay. Okay, so anyway, so the Bible Belt sees this as deviant behavior. And so those who support it are not seen as um, rationally uh, they're not seen as rational people. Let's put it that way. They are not seen as people who have the fear of God, who have a moral compass. This seems to be the new uh, buzzword, that is buzz phrase that is going everywhere. Moral compass. So let me use it. So they seem to have a, they seem to not have a moral compass that guides them in the right direction. And same-sex marriages, if you support them, then you are seen as somebody who is very, very deviant. There is this lady. She was a senator, and she's an activist of the same-sex marriage in California. So in the 1980s, around 84, I think it was, or 85, 84, um, Walter Mondale was running for president um, from the Democratic Party. Now, among the Americans, the Democratic Party is actually seen as a more of a liberal party. And Walter Mondale, when he chose to run for president as a candidate uh, of the Democratic Party, he also wanted to prove his credentials as a forward thinking person. So he said, I will pick up a woman as my running mate for the post of vice president. So there were two ladies who whose names were proposed. One was Geraldine Ferraro, Ferrero, Geraldine Ferraro, and the other lady was Diane Feinstein. Initially, everybody thought that Walter Mondale will pick up Diane Feinstein, uh, but he didn't do that because he was cautioned that she was ultra left, radical left, very left, call it whatever you want, and that she might become a liability. So he chose the safe path and picked up Geraldine Ferraro as his vice presidential candidate. Well, they both got defeated. That's a different issue. But what I'm trying to say is that even a liberal party, a party that supports liberalism, that also was a little afraid of, it was a little afraid of, you know, picking up somebody who is considered to be radically left. So for them, liberalism is not a philosophical system as we see it, unless you're somebody like Terence Ball, who is a very good political theorist from the University of Minnesota. Unless you're somebody like that, you don't or your Sheldon Goldman, uh, you will, from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, you will not understand liberalism in its philosophical sense. You'll understand liberalism in this sense as the opposite of conservatism, and somehow uh, tending to be deviant, sorry, not devious. And I have spent so much time telling you this because Rawls is an American. And when we talk about John Rawls, and when we talk about Rawlsian liberalism, we have to be careful, very, very careful uh, in our application of the category of liberalism to him. I'm not saying we should not apply that category. We should understand how we are applying that particular category of liberal thinker or liberal philosopher to John Rawls. When we are doing this exercise of calling him a liberal philosopher, we are using the European and Indian, because our ties with Europe, thanks to the British, are very strong. So most of our categories of understanding and all those things are mediated by our original Western education system, which was the British education system. So we use these categories. I've been to Harvard. I've been to the department. I think I told you this once. I've been to the department where John Rawls taught, which is the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. And the walls were full of photographs of people like Robert Putnam and people like Samuel Huntington, all of whom are conservatives. There are no photographs of John Rawls. So there was this old crow who was there, apparently from 1965 or something like that. And I asked her, how come there's no Rawls here? Not a single photograph of John Rawls anywhere. Or Judith Schklar. Okay, Judith Schklar. I will talk about her when we do Rousseau. I think the greatest scholarship on Rousseau is what is to be found in Judith Schklar. Okay, and if I asked her why aren't there photographs of these two people? Then she takes me to one room, which will be something like, say what, uh, 7 by 7, 7 feet by 7 feet. And there is a small board which says Schklar room. And funnily, the only things that are there in that room were two sofas, individual sofas. That's it, nothing else. So I asked her, what is the purpose of this room? And she says, well, people can sit here. Now, obviously, there are a couple of sofas. I suppose people can sit there. But is it a sitting room? Do universities have rooms where people sit? I don't know. And her answer to the absence of the photograph of John Rawls is, why will we have this photograph here? It'll probably be in the Department of Philosophy. I said, why will it be in the Department of Philosophy? He belonged to this department. He belonged to this department. So you see, in America, Rawls is not respected at all. The very university in which he taught, researched, and in my considered opinion, which coincides with a number of other people, John Rawls, one of the greatest political philosophers of the 20th century, without an iota of doubt, without an iota of doubt, is not even talked about. Like I said, I've been there a few times, different universities. Nobody wants to talk about Rawls. I realize the only people who talk about Rawls are black scholars. They talk about Rawls. None of the white scholars that I met actually talk about Rawls. Even the so called progressive ones. And that is why I love this line uh, that Roger Waters wrote in a song called Deja Vu. In that he said, you lean to the left, but you walk to the right. Okay, so that is how deceitful some of these academicians in America are. And so Rawls is disowned. So I want you to understand this. So when we talk about Rawls as, yeah, you,
So nobody still acknowledges him there. Then how did he uh, survive, or how did he take this up during his time of teaching?
there um, people are hostile to me in my department. They have been hostile to me for more than 30 years. Have I not survived? Have I not stuck to my guns? I've had to made
Right.
I had to make some compromises, which is not taking up positions head of the department. I was due to take them long ago. All these people who are now head and all that, they're all very junior to me. So my survival instinct told me, don't take up chairman board of studies, because if I take up chairman board of studies, then there will be people will try to sabotage. If I take up head of the department, then I'll have to work with this hostile people. I'll act right now. I can, and that is the reason why I didn't even put in so much time in arts college. Okay, because I thought that is the seat of all politics. So I spent time in other colleges, more time in other colleges, and I could have become head chairperson board studies, head dean of social sciences. I didn't take up any of these offices because of my desire to live peacefully, teach what I want to teach. If you want these administrative posts, these are all surrogate bureaucracies. One could have aimed for the real bureaucracy, which is the civil services. I never even applied for civil services, though at one time I thought I wanted to become a civil servant. But it was mainly people like Professor Sudipto Kaviraj. Uh, he has been a huge influence on me. The other day I was talking to you about socialization and I said reference group. My reference group consisted of people like Professor Sudipto Kaviraj, uh, Professor Gurpreet Mahajan, who I'm told is retiring this year. Uh, then Professor Sanjay Palshikar, who's now in the University of Hyderabad. So these are the people, and none of them have taken up these posts. None of them have taken up these posts.
Sir,
They've
what is retirement age of professor?
sorry, sorry.
What is the age? At which age professors do retire?
In central universities is 65 with extension if necessary for another 5 years. In Usmania University, it is 60 years.
I hope Kaviraj is 75. He is
What?
in,
What?
Professor Kaviraj is 75.
Yeah, but he's working in America now, and he's in Colombia. And in America, people don't retire. There's no retirement age. There's no retirement age. When Professor Kaviraj taught me, he would have been in his mid or late 40s. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, you have answered.
Yeah. Because in America, there's no age of retirement. You can work as long as you like. He's in Colombia. He's in Colombia, and he was the one who invited me to Colombia. And I'm eternally grateful to him for that. Uh, he was my hero, continues to be my hero. And Gurpreet Mahajan is another one. Gurpreet Mahajan and Sanjay Palshikar, they basically had a more hands-on influence on me in terms of telling me how I had to improve in certain areas when it came to writing. And I'm in great debt to both Professor Sanjay Palshikar and Professor Gurpreet Mahajan for that, and also for their scholarship. But Professor Sudipta Kaviraj is a different category. Um, you can talk with him about something very, very ordinary. You might think it is something very ordinary. Ask him, like, so what did you do during vacation this year? And even that answer is somehow enriching. And when I brought him to TIS, I actually brought him to TIS. Uh, Everybody was saying it was like we are meeting a rishi, because he's like that only. He's got a beard and unkempt hair, but he's an amazing, amazing scholar, amazing person. Anyway, let me not get into those things. I'm talking about America. So you have to be very careful that when we are applying the category of liberalism, the Americans also apply it, but they apply it in a pejorative way, negative way. We apply it in a positive way. We apply it in a positive way. So why do we say we apply it in a positive way? Uh, because yesterday I told you about Hobbes's definition of justice. Justice is what people agree it is. Okay. Now, very funnily, Rawls takes that very idea that justice is what people will agree to be, but he doesn't apply it like Hobbes does. His application of the idea that justice is what people think it is very, very differently articulated. So I'll get to that point. The first point we make about Rawls is that we talk about his liberalism not in the pejorative American way, but in the European way, which is far more appreciative of okay. Now you must understand that even though America and Europe have close ties, because what you have as people in America, those who control America, let's put it that way, They are Europeans, white Europeans, but the Europeans have been through historic turmoils in society, which the Americans have been insular to. If you take the 19th century, the 19th century in Europe, especially in England, we have intellectual and social upheavals. The greatest upheaval was caused by Karl Marx and also the anarchists like Bakunin. Okay. And what was the upheaval? The upheaval pertains to the criticism of the institution of the state as not being neutral, but uh, something which is an instrument of class exploitation and rather not and through the enactment of laws that would legitimate the exploitation of the proletariat by the uh, capitalists. So the state is not an independent institution. It is controlled by the by propertied and capitalist classes, That is the criticism. And Marxism created quite a bit of upheaval. And John Stuart Mill's support to the Chartist movement is another thing that added to the upheaval. And Hume and his philosophical skepticism, though not a major force, did contribute to this intellectual upheaval, which resulted in the social upheaval. Somehow, the Americans escaped all this. Their 19th century was also uh, one of upheavals, but that was in terms of the Confederates versus the Unionists. The Confederates were the southern states who were against the abolition of the antebellum laws, and they wanted to basically go their own way, not be a part of the United States of America. So that led to a civil war over the question of slavery. And even though it has been abolished, it's like the helmet rule. In the 1980s, you had the Rodney King riots because this person, an innocent person, was shot dead by a police officer, a white police officer shot dead this person called Rodney King, was a black, who was only at a uh, what they call a filling station and what we call petrol bunks. Um, he shot him dead. So there were riots in Los Angeles, huge riots, and they lasted quite some time. Uh, so the prejudices against the blacks still works. And if you look at what is I have forgotten this, that Floyd, what is his name? This
George Floyd, sir.
George Floyd. Thank you. George Floyd. The fact that he was again, now it's been established that he died because of the police officer putting his knee on his neck and asphyxiating him. So the prejudices are there. They aren't gone. So they made those laws, but like I said, it's like the helmet rule. The helmet rule has been there from 1888. It has been incorporated in the Motor Vehicles Act of 1988 because till then it was up to a state to decide whether they'll implement the helmet rule or not. In 1988, people decided that let us make it mandatory in all state through the Motor Vehicles Act. So according to that, you have to wear your helmet not only as a rider, but even as a pillion rider. Okay, so you have to wear helmets, but that's hardly ever been implemented. Again, the elections have been lost because people tried to implement the helmet rule. So that's the reason why the police were going easy on the helmet thing. Uh, so it's like that. So the cops would turn another way if they saw a black getting hit by whites. It still happens. Anyway, so except for that civil war, uh, there was no other upheaval. And that civil war didn't have an intellectual component to it. So it didn't actually result in any kind of great social upheaval. I keep telling people at the time when Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery, he himself is supposed to have had around 600 slaves. So anyway, so the antebellum laws were there even before that, but they're never implemented. So any rule is a rule as long as you implement it. If you don't implement it, it's not a rule, right? It's just a set of words without substance. So since this upheaval did not happen, you don't find what happened in Europe. In Europe, so these are some of the things that the Europeans did. When I say the state made some adjustments, it is actually the capitalist class that made the adjustments. And the adjustments were like, okay, there are unemployed people, so you give them unemployment doles. Nowadays, they don't call them that. They call it an allowance. Okay, they call it an allowance, but in reality, it is a dole. A dole is a is giving alms, ALMS. Okay, so they initially called them doles, but now they are calling them, otherwise it looks like, you're giving something to a beggar. So they therefore decided to talk about it as an allowance. Now, free education for all didn't happen everywhere. It happened in Germany, first and foremost. It happened in Germany. Then it happened in the Netherlands and in Finland. And that is a system that continues till today. From KG, kindergarten, garden, right down to, right up to, sorry, the PhD level, uh, education is free of cost, even to a foreigner. So if you have the money to be able to live in Germany or in Netherlands, you can go there. You'll get admissions. At one time, they didn't have English medium uh, education. Now, most universities in Europe offer courses in English. And did I tell you the story of what happened in the University of Leiden with my friend? Did I ever tell you that?
No, sir.
Okay. Um, if you have visited socialsciences.in, this has been given to me, that space. I have got it free of cost. That website was done free of cost by my friend, who's much younger than I am. He's about 9 years, I think, younger than I am. His mother and my mother were very good friends. So this chap applied in the University of Leiden, which is in the Netherlands. Leiden, Leiden. He applied for some course. I can't remember what course it was. And he got admission. So he went to Leiden. Uh, he was also part of a group called AISEC. I've forgotten what it stands for. So what these AISEC, it's a universal, it's there in all countries. So what these people do is that if an AISEC member uh, gets admission in any of the foreign universities, especially in these countries, Germany, Netherlands, and Finland, they give them accommodation at a very nominal rate, or sometimes they give them accommodation almost free of cost, so that they, otherwise Europe is horribly expensive, horribly expensive. Okay, so they give them some kind of subsidized or free accommodation and allow them to pursue their studies. And the university also sometimes gives you some position like a library assistant, uh, where you help the librarian do some things, and you also become in charge of hostel buildings. So what you do is you earn a little bit of money doing those jobs on the campus where you are studying. You can't work outside the campus in Europe like in America. Okay, so you do get these things, and you will see uh, that this fellow had the support of these, they used to call it Isaac, AISEC, uh, and he landed up in Leiden, and he went to the university, sat in class, and there was a professor who walked in and started teaching in the Dutch language. Now, this fellow was completely taken aback, and he said maybe this professor is going to do that. So he sat through the class, and then he waited for the next professor who came and did exactly the same thing, taught in the Dutch language. Then this fellow panicked, and he asked the head of the department. He went to his office and said, "Look, I don't know the Dutch language. Everybody is teaching in Dutch. How will I cope with this?" And the head of the department said, "But we only have Dutch as a medium of instruction. Why did you come here?" He said, "In the ad, it was not mentioned that Dutch is the medium of instruction. I sent all my proposals, including a statement of purpose and all in English, and I was given an admission, so I assumed that there will be instruction in English." And the head said, "Okay, give me a day." So he found out from the foreign admissions office, they dug out this fellow's file, and after they dug out the file, they found that they made a mistake. Instead of sending him a letter saying that you are ineligible for it, they sent him a letter saying you've got admission. So guess what the university did after that? Take a wild guess.
They might have appointed separate faculties for him.
Well, not exactly. Most of the faculty members knew broken English. Okay, they knew broken English, and they said, since this chap is sitting in class, we shall have classes in English. So that university teachers polished their English skills, learnt the English language properly in order to be able to teach properly. They let him write his exams in English. They basically graded him objectively for what he wrote. He was treated very, very well. Nobody ever said because of this, not even the students. Please remember, the students are all capable only of Dutch language. Some of them also knew English. They also learnt English. They also learnt English. Okay. So that is the kind of work ethic you find in Europe. We claim that we are such a great civilization, we are this, we are that. I remember the last time when I was in arts college, we used to get a lot of foreign students. Uh, and I told these people that, listen, if you're not going abroad, the next best thing is happening to you, which is people from abroad are coming here, talk to them, learn about their cultures, and you'll have a wider worldview. But none of them did that. In fact, two dadas came and said, for the sake of those fellows who came from outside, you want us to listen to you in English? I told them there are two things here. First and foremost, the official medium of instruction of this university is English. Second, they have paid money to get seats here, whereas you are taking scholarships. So jolly well learn the language. Jolly well learn the language. We say Atidhi Devo Bhava and what? This is Atidhi Devo Bhava. People didn't even know that our official medium of instruction is English. So that is how the Europeans evolved because of the criticism of the state and also the society indirectly. So that intellectual turmoil led to all these developments, and it led to liberalism, brought in tolerance. Tolerance is what it brought in. When Madam Padma asked me yesterday, the simplest definition of liberalism, I said it is being tolerant to what is not like you, what is against you. Tolerate that, settle your problem through logical argumentation. Logical argumentation. That is what liberalism did, because it was a philosophical system, despite so many strands being there in it. Despite all the strands being there in it, it basically inculcated the value, or rather the values of toleration, the values of respecting opposition, all these things. And that is why the state changed. That is why the state changed. Okay, I agree that the state didn't do anything wonderful. Okay, with all these things, by giving an unemployment toll, you're not allowing somebody to come up. But when you're giving free education, When you're giving free education, you will see that you're actually empowering people. That is why I started that institute. But nobody comes. Because in India, if you give anything free, my friend and colleague who's no longer in the department, he's retired, he used to say, we Indians will drink, he called it phenyl, it is supposed to be phenyl, if you give it free of cost. In Hindi, he said, free में दिए तो phenyl भी पीते. Actually, that is very wrong. We Indians don't want to be seen as poor, even if you're poor. You don't want to be seen as poor. If you give something free, it has no value. Put a price on it. Put a price. If I say I'm going to charge you 1.5 lakhs for what I'm going to teach, believe me, there'll be a line of people. They will sell 1 acre of land to pay that fees, but they won't come if it is free. I knew this, but I thought, let me test it out. So the future of that institute is uncertain. Okay, somebody came from Just Dial and put me on Just Dial, and I said, okay, it's advertised there. I get inquiries, and the moment I say it's free of cost, they say, okay, thank you, and nobody comes back. So, but free education is the real empowerment. That, because if you're educated, then you can compete. You can compete. So, due to America not seeing all this, the American idea of the poor people, they don't even understand this thing called accident of birth. Okay, if you're born in a very poor family, and in America there are no subsidies, no doles, nothing. You can't go to school. There, they call them public schools. Public schools are those that are run by government agencies. Out here, public schools are elitist because we follow the British model. There, if you went to a public school, it basically means that you are not very affluent. Only the affluent go to the private schools. Only the affluent go to the Ivy League universities. Okay, so, but there are people who can't even go to a public school in America, and they don't care. And I told you, I was there when Obama was trying to introduce this Medicare thing, and people were saying on television, people were saying, these are all lazy people, they don't work, they don't do anything. Okay, why are we tolerating them here? Why should our taxpayers' money go to their welfare? No need for this. And that is why when Trump became the president, The first thing he did is got rid of that Obamacare, which is like our Arogyasri, which is now being incorporated into the Prime Minister. What is that thing called? Uh, it's like Arogyasri, but it is now being done nationwide. Where
Aishman Bharat.
Ayushman Bharat.
Ayushman Bharat. Thank you. I'm getting old. Ayushman Bharat. Do people say, why are we wasting taxpayers' money? We don't. We don't. If you give free education to somebody, people are happy. Nobody says, why are you giving free education? So, this turmoil changed liberalism in many ways, but it still continued to remain individualist or individualistic. It continued to remain individualistic. It did not ever let the word justice come into the language or vocabulary of liberalism. It was Marx and the anarchists who talked about justice, and they didn't do it very intelligently, in my opinion. I have immense respect for Marx, the truly great, one of the great figures of our time, meaning the modern period. For me, the greatest is, all-time greatest is Jesus Christ, all-time greatest. Next is Mahatma Gandhi. Then I'll say Marx. These are people.
Sir, what about Buddha, Gautam Buddha?
Gautama Buddha. Yes, Gautama Buddha too. Gautama Buddha too. But you must understand that the reason why I did not include his name in this is because Gautama Buddha did not face the hostility. He did not face the hostility that somebody like Jesus Christ faced. Even in the face of hostility, Jesus Christ stood for what he believed in and gave up his life. Same thing with Mahatma Gandhi. Unfortunately and shamefully, it is not the British who took his life, Indians took his life. Indians took his life. That's a very shameful fact. But please remember that the freedom movement of India is unprecedented and it has never ever been replicated anywhere else. Based in non-violence. We are the only country that became independent without getting violent. We are the only country. That's why I talk of him. And I talk of Marx because he sat amidst the ranks of the proletariat, saw how they were suffering, and mounted an attack on capitalism, not just through his writings. I also told you he established the Communist International, Comintern, as it was called. He tried to make a movement out of it, a working class movement. Okay, so that is the reason why I talk about these three people. More than Buddha, I'll add Ambedkar. Though I think that his brushed strokes in characterization of ancient India are too large and miss out subtle nuances, and that his conception of the caste system is not what it is in ancient India. In fact, if you study carefully, southern civilization doesn't seem to have had a jati system or a varna system at all. Okay, so even if you say there was,
Sir,
uh,
what is the difference between Jati system and Varna system?
varna system does not uh, treat the varnas as unequal. Okay, varna is hues of the same color. According to the varna system, your varna is decided by the planetary positions in your birth chart, or the Janam Kundali, as it is called. That decides, and in a family, you could have all four varnas. In a family, you could have all four varnas. So, and it's not like the Shudra was seen as low. He was not seen as low because it was the Shudra who produced food. So the Varna system doesn't have a hierarchy, and it doesn't say Kshatriyas are kings. It doesn't say that. It describes an individual who is a Kshatriya. You become a Kshatriya if Mars is the planet that rules you. You become a Brahmin if Jupiter is the planet that rules you. It's like that. It doesn't mean kings become, Kshatriyas are kings. That's a terrible interpretation. Jati system is the perverting of the Varna system, where you now say that we will marry only among Brahmins, only among Kshatriyas, so that endogamy, as Ambedkar calls it, that system happened in the Jati system. So these became, they perpetuated their own Jati through their children by marrying within one's own community, or one's own Jati. Okay, and that also introduced the Panchama Jati. People say Panchama Varna. There was no Panchama Varna. In the Jati system, there was Panchama Jati, the untouchable. This was done according to some, including Gandhi, by the Brahmins. And therefore, you'll see that the Kshatriyas retaliated by making changes to the Vedas and calling them Upanishads. And once the Jati system happened, please don't take it as the Brahman was considered superior by everyone. No, it wasn't. The Kshatriyas tried to say they are more superior to the Brahmins. The Vaishyas were trying to say that they were the Satviks and therefore they should get the highest system. And once the Jati system came, these three upper Jatis introduced the system of Dvija, twice born. Your first birth is your physical birth. The second birth is your thread ceremony. So that is why that is called the second birth. So Dvija. This was applicable to the first three Varnas, but not applicable to the Shudras. Before, like I said, you must also understand that there are no Kshatriya dynasties in this country. They are all either Shudra dynasties or they are Brahmin dynasties, or in the case of the southern dynasties, they have later on been called Shudras, but I don't think the southern dynasties, the classification of either Varna or Jati was applicable to them. Because if you look at the movement of the Aryans, they kept going from Central Asia into India. The culture went towards the east all the way up to Japan. There is Shinto in Japan, which is Japanese for Hindu. There are two religions in Japan, Buddhism and Shintoism. They call it religions, some don't. Shintoism is what is supposed to be Hindu. Just like Dhyana became Zen, Hindu became Shinto. It went that side, but it didn't come to the peninsular part. So if you look at the Alvars, for example, Nammalvar. Nammalvar, today people say, came from an untouchable jati. He was the sixth of the 12 Alvars. And who was the person? And he's considered to be the greatest among the Alvars. And who made, he didn't write. He didn't write his songs. Who wrote them down? Another Alvar who was before him, who was a Brahmin. And this Brahmin's name is Madhura Kavi Alvar. He said, what I have, my bhakti gayas, as they are called, gayams, he said they are nothing compared to what Nammalvar has written. That's what I mean by Ambedkar missing out on all these. Where did the Kshatriyas rule at all? Most of the empires were Shudra empires. The rest were Brahmin empires. Anyway, let's get back to Western political thought. I'll end it here today. So, despite making so many changes, they still were guarded. These were things that they did for the sake of escaping the criticism that the state doesn't care for all its people. But they didn't talk about justice. They didn't let that word enter the vocabulary of liberalism. They didn't let go of power, just like in America. Why do they want that electoral college? They want that electoral college so that the power will always remain with the whites. If you ask anybody about America and you say, what country is America? People will say it's an Anglo-Saxon country. But if you look at, if you club all the non-Anglo-Saxons who are in America, if you club them all together, they are a much, much bigger majority than the Anglo-Saxon Protestants. But the Anglo-Saxon Protestants want to keep power. They want to control. That's why that system of electoral college. That's why only 538 people. That's why the primaries with the caucuses to retain power. In Europe also the same thing happened, but the intellectual upheavals are extremely important to note, especially Marxism. Marx is another one of my heroes. Most definitely one of my heroes. And I'm not a Marxist. I don't agree with 90% of the things he says, or perhaps 100%. But to be able to stand up, to be able to stand up for what you believed in, that is really something, and it changed the course of European history. Look at Britain, the seat of capitalism. We believe it's a two-party system. It's not a two-party system. It's a multi-party system. But which are the two dominant parties? The Tories or the Conservative Party. Originally, it was called the Tory Party. And in the late 19th century, when franchise was given to all males, you also had another party called the Whigs, WHIGs. And funnily enough, in the history of America also in the 19th century, there was a Tory party and there was a Whig party. The Whig party was replaced in importance by the Labour Party. And that is thanks to Marx. Churchill, who belonged to the Conservative Party or the Tory Party, refused to give independence to India. Who gave independence to India? The Labour Party. Clement Attlee, the Prime Minister of England, who said we are going to give independence to India. Clement Attlee belonged to the Labour Party. So in part, Marx had some role to play in our getting independence. In our getting independence. So that's why he's one of my heroes. So now that I have established the contrast, we will be studying John Rawls as a philosopher of liberalism, as liberalism is understood by Europe and by us in India, not in the American sense of the term, even though he's an American. He was called a liberal in America, but it was in the pejorative sense. Pejorative sense. That's why the place where he worked, where he wrote, they don't acknowledge his existence. Judith Shklar was also branded as a liberal. And they put that two sofas in a 7x7 room with a board which is about this big. Whereas all these chaps, conservatives, they have huge portraits throughout the portals of Harvard University. And they are still there, by the way, because like I said, they don't retire. John Rawls died, Judith Clark died, and you don't find their pictures there. Any other questions, Mr. Akshay Puneet? Did I answer your Varna Jati satisfactorily?
Yes, sir.
The Jati system is a perverted system. It's the bad one. The Varna system was not bad.
Sir, Manu belongs to upper caste or lower caste?
Which one?
Manu.
See, there is no one Manu. First and foremost, you must understand that. Okay? What you have to understand is that ancient Indian philosophy believes in a cycle which lasts millions of years. That is called a kalpa. Okay? So it all begins with the Krita Yuga. People call it Satya Yuga. Please don't call it that. It is Krita. Kruta. Krta. Ideally. But Krita is how people write. Don't use Satya Yuga, that there's no such Yuga as Satya Yuga. Because it's not connected to Satya, it is connected to Dharma. In the Krita Yuga, that is the best because only Dharma prevails. There is no adharma in the Krita Yuga. The next yuga is the Treta Yuga. In this, adharma raises its head. Adharma raises its head, and it is still not very strong. So it can be put down by using dharmic means, using means which are dharmic, meaning that it is dharma. You use dharmic means in order to conquer adharma. The Dwapara Yuga is where adharma becomes quite powerful, and so sometimes in order to give in order for dharma to defeat adharma, dharma is forced to use adharmic means to establish itself. So that is the third yuga. The fourth yuga is the Kali Yuga. In the Kali Yuga, adharma becomes very powerful. Dharma starts weakening until such a time that we don't see dharma anymore. And therefore, when the world becomes adharmic, then it has to collapse. That is the pralaya. That is a pralaya. And then the cycle begins all over again. So we are in the 14th cycle. Now, in this cycle, in the 14th cycle, Rama was the figure of the Treta Yuga. Krishna was the figure of the Dwapara Yuga. Okay? And if you look at the Kurukshetra war, you find that, say, Suryodhana being killed by Bhima by hitting him on his thighs is adharma. That is adharma. Arjuna shooting arrows onto Karna at a time when he is not holding a weapon and standing in his chariot. At that time, to shoot arrows at him and kill him is adharma. But the justification is that Suryodhana, Karna, Sushasana, please don't call them Duryodhana, that's not their names. They are negative names given to them later. Duryodhana, Dushasana and all. Su is good, Dur is bad. So, in order to conquer these adharmic people, you had to take recourse to adharma. right? That is what. Now, at one time people said, you talked about Manu. At one time people said it was Manu Dharma Shastra, because there are Dharma Shastras which are an integral part of the Vedas and the Vedangas. Dharma Shastras are integral part of that. So Manu Dharma Shastra was something that was used for some time before research showed that Manu and his writing, which people stopped calling Manu Dharma Shastra and only call Manu Smriti. Smriti here has to be understood as history, recollections of history. That's what you have to understand. That is the so it's no longer Manu Dharma Shastra, it's Manu Smriti. Manu Smriti was written somewhere between 1260 to 1200 BCE. And the Manu is not a name. Manu is a title, lawgiver, lawgiver. Okay, that is what it means. And if this cycle began with the Ramayana and all these things in it, and you talk about Mahabharata and the Veda Vyasa, why is he called Veda Vyasa? He's called Veda Vyasa because he's the one. There are various Vyasas, by the way. There's no one Vyasa. Vyasa is a writer. That's why Vyas in Hindi or Vyasam in Telugu is an essay. Vyasa is one who wrote something. This Vyasa, who is supposed to have dictated the Mahabharata and Ganesha wrote it, this Vyasa organized, his name is Krishna Dvaipayana. Krishna Dvaipayana, he organized the Vedas into those four, as Rig Veda, as Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharvana Veda. He organized them. That's why he came to be called Veda Vyasa. And because Veda Vyasa is supposed to have been the force behind the Mahabharata, it basically means that people started calling it the Panchama Veda, which is wrong. And if you want to know the caste of the Manu who gave us this Manu Smriti, he is not a Brahmin. He is a Kshatriya. And if you look at the Manu Smriti, if you read it carefully, it is based in Upanishads and not in Vedas. Because the Upanishads portray Kshatriyas as the highest. So, so much loose talk has gone on about these things that people don't really know what is what. And you have all these people coming on television, Garikapati Narasimha Rao and Vaddiparthi Prabhakar and Chaganti Koteshwar Rao coming and mouthing homilies and platitudes, which are cock and bull stories. They have nothing to do with the Vedas, with the Upanishads, nothing. They have nothing to do with this. And the Manusmriti is not a part of either the Vedas or the Upanishads. Like I told you, it is dated between 1260 to 1200 BCE. It is newer than Buddhism. It is newer than Jainism. Leave alone Sanatana Dharma, which is much, much more older. So, Manu, you don't find any mention of a Manu in Vedas or in Upanishads. You don't. And like I said, it is scholars of Sanatana Dharma who have said that this is not Dharma Shastra in any sense of the term. Even in the most lenient sense of the term, it is not a Dharma Shastra. It does not have the sanction of any kind of Shastra, any kind of Dharma, and therefore they gave it the name Manusmriti. Similarly, you have a Yajnavalkya Smriti. Among many Smritis that are there, Manusmriti is one of them. Please don't put him on a pedestal, not as in a great figure, but please don't think he gave directives and what everybody is following in Hindu society is instructions from Manu. No, that is not true. Not true at all. And I'm talking to you not on the top of my head. I have done research on this. For the last 5 years, I've been researching on these things. I've been trying to learn the Sanskrit language so that I can understand these properly. I've learned a bit of it. I can now understand. Manu is an insignificant figure, completely insignificant figure. He's like a Tom, Dick, and Harry. That's his position. So you can say every Tom, Dick, Harry, and Manu have something to say about everything. Okay? Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Hmm?
We have answered, sir.
Thank you. And please, this is something that I've researched on. I've taken the help of scholars of Sanskrit. Right? So thank you
Yes,
very much. See you on Monday then.
yes.
Okay
Yes,
then.
sir.
Yeah.
Sir, some of our classmates were asking about assignments because other professors have told us to write assignments for this internal one. So, what are we supposed to do with our two papers?
Write whatever you want.
Means any
No,
guidelines how you want that to be?
only one guideline. Let it be related to Western political thought. in both papers.
Oh,
Okay, because that is also thought only. Though they are calling it ideologies, it is Western thought, right? So you can write on anything for both the papers, anything that is of your choice. Choose your subject. The only thing is, please don't give me only biographic details. Please don't give me only biographic details. Put in an effort to try and analyze. Especially Akshay Puneet, I want you to try and write an analytical piece, because you say your goal is to become an IAS officer. And if you have to become an IAS officer, if you clear the prelims and go to the mains, you have to write essays.
Yes.
So use this as an opportunity to practice writing.
Yes, sir.
I am against this MCQ thing, because all these MCQs don't teach you how to write. You can't build an argument. I'd like you all to build an argument.
Yes, sir.
And don't worry about marks, grades, and all. I just want you to do your work sincerely. Nobody will be penalized for grades. Get that fear out.
and
Get
so
that.
how to write, like you're saying, analytical? For example, if I choose any topic, if I choose marks, how
Well,
should I
you
continue?
first have to explain the historical context in which Marx was writing. Then put his theory, not the entire theory. Choose one or two of his
Right.
part of his theory. Write that and see what the criticisms against those were. Just a little bit of work you'll have to do.
Right.
Then you'll be able to critically understand Marx. So look at criticism that came especially from within the ranks of Marxist sympathizers.
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Sir, anything
And
about length and all?
mm, it's a 5-mark thing, so write about 4 pages, not more than that.
Yes.
You don't need to write more than 4 pages.
Right.
And no typewritten thing, huh?
Right.
Handwriting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, only handwritten. And please write it in your own language. Even if you're not comfortable, start writing in your own language. Those of you who are not confident about your English, don't worry. I said I'm not going to penalize you. Try to write in English, because that's the only way you'll learn to write, and you'll need to write in order to get a job tomorrow. Nobody will give you MCQ questions and give you a job. Nobody will. You'll have to learn to build an argument both while speaking and while writing. Okay?
Yes, sir. So, can I put this in our group?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's not a secret.
No, because most of us are not here, no? So they
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
know
So why do
about
you
it.
need my permission to put it in the group? Please put it in the group.
Yes.
Yeah. All right then. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.